Okay. So Sandy asked me to do a presentation here, so if you don't like it, let's just blame Sandy. Okay, and Sam's here too, and Sam knows that I don't divide. Well, good. Well, but you know that I don't divide. I'm not a contentious speaker whatsoever. Let's get rid of this. So, Stephen Henderson wrote yesterday in the Free Press, if you're still in the ranks of those who think this is a nation that has moved past the cultural or social vices of race or racism, then last week should have shaken you to the core. Now I'll get back to the likelihood of this core shaking, and I think the key word in that statement is should, but we'll table that. What Henderson is referring to is a week rife with racial conflict. The first event was Rachel Dolezal, a high-ranking NAACP official's alleged racial deception, which led to a new use of the term transracial to shift races. And Dylan Roof, a young white man's racially motivated assassination of 9 black individuals in a church in South Carolina, a terrorist act by any other name. Such actions by their nature have become political tools. For the liberal left, a chance to highlight and discuss white privilege, and for the conservative right, a chance to evade and redirect. Presidential hopeful Rick Perry went as far as calling Roof's massacre an accident. He meant incident, but few are calling it what it is, an act of terrorism, racially motivated terrorism. Dolezal's incident, combined with the circus around Caitlyn Jenner, has also led to a serious false analogy in which the terms transracial and its inherent illegitimacies, one does not choose race, has been used to undermine transgender identities. If Rachel can't change races, then transgender people can't change genders. A playground logic that sadly a young trans blogger took the bait with, claiming she was brave for transitioning, while Dolezal's actions were not because she stood behind her privilege. Such leads to my conclusions. Not every action against injustice moves towards change. Although we all want to do something when faced with adversity, there are actions, despite being well-intentioned and quite specious, that are simply not helpful. It turns out that conversations about privilege are not new. They were fiercely discussed after Trayvon, to offer one example, and tend to begin and end within liberal circles, HuffPost, Salon, Boston Globe, etc., and offer the appearance of action for those liberal collectivists and their social networks, but do not go much further. It turns out racists, sexists, homophobes, etc., aren't too interested in facts. Go figure. The great myth of liberal rationalism. If we just tell people what's going on, they'll be concerned and want to do something. Well, discussions of privilege are no substitute for the representation of black voices or for direct action in communities where injustice is prominent. And sadly, despite the sentiment that these slacktivists may have, these ironically privileged discussions most often end the conversation rather than open them to actions which produce material change. Dolezal's conversation was thus not ideal to enter into, and I tried to abstain from it, as it moved the conversation away from important material concerns in black communities. The most detrimental thing to change is often action. Actions that produce the feeling or appearance of change and thus end the drive towards real progress. Getting good at this page turning thing. This is where we might question Henderson's initial claim that America has been shaken to its racial core. It turns out the poor and underprivileged don't have much of a say in American mainstream media, politics, economics, etc., in society as a whole, and have historically done far more by disrupting these daily practices than by participating in them. Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., the Wobblies, Stonewall, perhaps you've heard of these things. Change is not slow. Change is taken and it's not given. It is not a gift but a necessity. So I would like to question the liberal response to these events and reiterate that action itself does not equate to change. Far from it. Action most always leads to the reproduction of the same means which have structurally constructed the problem, by adhering to institutional tools which exist in such a way to maintain complicity to systems of power and hierarchy. As Audre Lorde put it, the master's tools will not undo the master's house. This is where modern systems of power have become so impressive. They know when to offer a token, to afford minor grievances which silence major issues. This leads to a game of whack-a-mole that activists will lose as more problems continuously arise, as the resources are obviously stacked to benefit those in power. The system itself must be challenged. As previously noted, great gains for the underprivileged have most often come from disrupting power, not participating in it. We need to create new tools. By continuously focusing on privilege, the left is missing a crucial opportunity to question the validity and legitimacy of the social categories of race, gender, and class, the cultural boxes we are all thrown into. Yes, sure, there is white privilege. That is quantifiable. But again, those who do not want to see it won't. But what Rachel Dolezal shows us is what Black people in America have continually affirmed. Race is assigned. It is arbitrarily designated upon certain bodies deemed inferior for the maintenance of cultural relationships of power. This is why Dolezal's action is truly offensive. This is not a choice. However, race is nothing more than a matter of light and climate. We all originated from the same origins. And yet, instead of questioning the harmful divisions of race and the logics of injustice on which they rest, Dolezal is thrown under the bus for failing to perform the box correctly. Sadly, the trans blogger, Cat Black, who I spoke of earlier, is placing the focus of trans identity on physical transitioning, a heteronormative process. And this also offers similar effects in categorically reducing trans identity to surgical procedures, a battle which was being fought heroically by Laverne Cox and Janet Mock, to name a few, who moved questions away from our bodies towards who we are, opening up new representations of self-expression for trans people, which of course fell apart recently thanks to Caitlyn Jenner's lofty bank account. In both cases, what is not necessary is a reaffirming of dangerous social categories which reproduce relations of political and economic power, but to break them and to offer a new logic of personhood in its place, which affords both the politics of location and the right and tools to meaningfully express oneself. I think the question will be, am I saying that race and gender or class are not real things? Of course they're real. But we can respect the autonomy and identities of race, genders, sexualities, etc., while also recognizing the ways in which systems of power have shaped and utilized these divisions to create conflict to maintain their own privilege and position. We must work together to challenge how we think about identity and to shatter these boxes which delegitimize certain identities, privilege others, and reproduce systematic inequality. This must accompany and enrich direct action to disrupt and repair social ills. A new language is necessary which affords both respect of difference and the freedom to represent oneself. Without acknowledging the ways in which race, gender, class, etc. maintain cultural relationships of power, while also offering a way to break and sever these boundaries, we'll simply be taking action and not creating change.